That was just him giving his opinion at the time. And Joe Rogan has shown that as he gets more information, he changes his mind, right? He evolves. And so to label that misinformation, what we're effectively doing is you can now weaponize misinformation and target anyone you want. And I just think that giving the media, giving our government that type of power is very dangerous because they will use. Today is Joe Rogan and it's COVID. Tomorrow is going to be something else, and it's going to hurt the most vulnerable. It's going to hurt those that are trying to fight for equality, because what do you do when you're trying to fight for equality? What do you do when you're trying to fight for fairness? You're fighting against entrenched interests, right? Entrenched interests with a lot of power that control media, that control government. And what tools are they going to use against you to silence you? Well, now they have a new tool called misinformation. What's up? What's up? Let's talk about Joe Rogan. I know
Oh, your boy Joe Rogan.
he's not my boy.
Come on, man. How many? I
¿Quién
want
te
I want
dijo?
our assistant to go back and check all the conversations where you've mentioned Joe Rogan's name.
Have I? ¿Quién te dijo? ¿Quién te dijo? Who told you that I listen to Joe Rogan? Who's spreading
Everybody does.
who's
Apparently
spreading
11 million people
misinformation?
do.
Okay, I I would listen to his clips on YouTube every now and then. Once he moved to Spotify, I'm one of those guys that I didn't follow him. I was like, I'm not going to download Spotify. I'm not going to create an account. If there's a good clip of him on YouTube and it comes up and it's recommended, yeah, maybe I'll listen to it. But yeah, it's not like I followed him too. I'm not one of the 10 million. He gets about 10 million views, 10 million listens, downloads per episode. I think that's the last figure that I heard.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. It is insane. And I think for the listeners of the Brown perspective, I want you to know that the reason why we're not listed on Spotify is because we refuse to be on that same platform.
Okay, I take some issue with that because
Okay.
okay, what's his name? Neil Young.
Yes, Neil
Okay, so
Young.
Neil Young says that he doesn't want to be associated with the platform that gives Joe Rogan a voice, and then he tells people to go over to Amazon, the champion of workers' rights. Come on, dude, that's total hypocrisy there.
But what, yeah, I mean, that highlights some of the problem that we have, right? That we don't have, and particularly with this additional consolidation of the platforms and the ways that we can try to get this out there. Um, it's problematic, right? Because then, to your point, every other platform is contaminated with with racial or other type of problematic behavior or
Yeah,
sexual harassment, treatment of workers, go down the list.
yeah. So going back to Joe Rogan, he came under fire because first again because of that controversy with Neil Young, and then the other artists also jumping in. And
India and within those artists, India.arie, who's as an African American highlighted some of the problematic things about Rogan.
well, and also was that the artist that also highlighted how Spotify is essentially paying all the artists pennies, like
Yes,
in order to fund Joe Rogan, which is that is messed up. But
messed up.
that has nothing to do with this controversy. Obviously, Spotify feels that Joe Rogan is worth that much to them. But so he got in trouble again because of the accusation that he's spreading misinformation because of the COVID vaccine. And then after that, the video of him saying the N word came up, and they went back 10 years, and they counted over 100 times when he used it, and he got trouble because of that. Now,
Hmm.
I think today I'd like to focus more on that second one, on his use of the N word, and the blowback because of that. I don't really want to get into the whole controversy with misinformation because you already know how you feel about that. Well, I think you
Well,
do, but
I do, but how about our listeners?
I think we're paying a heavy price. I don't think people
Mm.
realize it. Trying to censor people's opinions, because at the end of the day, all he's doing is saying his opinion. People might think that they're doing the right thing, but ultimately, I think it's gonna come at a heavy price because Once you normalize a certain type of censorship, it's going to be used against other people. It won't stop with Joe Rogan. And so eventually, what I care about the most is anti-war protests. Eventually, they'll just start using it against anti-war protests, saying, "Oh, an Assad apologist or a Russian apologist spreading misinformation. We need to like censor you or cancel you." And so, Joe Rogan is not a medical professional. Joe Rogan is just a commentator, MMA commentator, and he has a podcast where he shares his opinion. He's not a professional. What does that tell you, right? So here's the problem that I have with the censorship. What does that tell you about the trust that our government and our institutions have in people being able to consume information and come to their own conclusions? So they were okay with that as long as they were the only ones putting out narratives. As long as they controlled the narrative and they were the gatekeepers of information, they were okay with people consuming that information and pretending like people have a choice to make up their own minds. But the minute that the internet came on, especially social media, now you have this flood of people expressing their opinions, and now they really show you how they really felt all along. That it's not that they ever really trusted people to come to their own conclusions. Is that they were only okay with it as long as they were the ones that controlled the propaganda and the narrative.
Well, I think
It shows you that they don't really trust people to come to their own conclusions because they're trying to censor everything. Like it makes no sense, right? What kind of message does that send?
well, I think is well, first of all, I think it highlights the importance of the freedom of the press, right? And I think in the wisdom of the Constitution, the fact that the founders knew that you needed to have a press to keep power accountable and
Right.
people informed to the best extent. So I think that yes, I think probably some of the information that the government shared when there was only two channels and everything was controlled, and I think at that point, I think the media was also very consolidated, very biased, or also operating in a way that advanced their own interests. So just like the
Or
owners of the LA Times covered the whole story and sort of build a case for, bringing water, stealing water.
or the New
Uh,
York Times pushing the war against Iran, pushing the war against in
yep.
Libya, the invasion of Libya. So right, so we know that these news agencies
Or Fox
are,
News promoting their views as well,
yeah, they're just
and the owners.
extensions in a way of like the military. In some cases, it seems that way. So
Yeah. So the thing here is not I don't and the censorship issue that you always bring up is I understand it, but I think it always can be used by bad people, and I guess that's the beauty of some of the rights that we have, right? The freedom of expression
mhm.
and all these things that we claim that yes, they can apply to really creative and amazing people and people who are doing good work, but then it can apply to some douchebags, and we still have to tolerate people trying to say some misinformation, but they have every right to. And to your point, it's up to us as the consumers, as the listeners, to formulate our minds. But obviously, the Supreme Court has set some boundaries around those freedoms, etc.
But
I
but giving your opinion on what you think is a reasonable, sound argument or conclusion that you came to, which is what Joe Rogan was doing around the vaccine, that was just him giving his opinion at the time. And Joe Rogan has shown that as he gets more information, he changes his mind, right? He evolves. And so to label that misinformation, what we're effectively doing is you can now weaponize misinformation and target anyone you want. And I just think that giving the media, giving our government that type of power is very dangerous because they will use. Today is Joe Rogan and it's COVID. Tomorrow is going to be something else, and it's not going to it's going to hurt the most vulnerable. It's going to hurt those that are trying to fight for equality, because what do you do when you're trying to fight for equality? What do you do when you're trying to fight for fairness? You're fighting against entrenched interests, right? Entrenched interests with a lot of power that control media, that control government. And what tools are they going to use against you to silence you? Well, now they have a new tool called misinformation. I mean, what is misinformation? It's just people's opinions.
Well, yeah, but you're right. I mean, misinformation is being weaponized, but misinformation on its own, it's a weapon, and it's a weapon that was developed and perfected by the FBI, by the CIA, for a number of reasons. So you're right, but I think the issue with Rogan now is that it wasn't the government interfering. This was another artist, a number of other artists, of individuals saying, okay, I want you to take down my content because I don't want to share that platform with this individual, and they have every right to do so. And then what they do with that is up their business. But now it's about the company, right? And
that
now
that
is the
that
company who has a large platform. How have they dealt with this issue,
but
and how are and what kind of responsibility do they have or not have? And I think you mentioned this at the beginning that they were like, well, okay, yeah, we can take your content out because Rogan is a by far more popular offering content in our platform.
yeah, and they'll side with Rogan, because it's still profitable to side with Rogan for now. If
And because I believe the the CEO of Spotify also used something that sounded a lot like the censorship logic that you just shared with us.
Yeah, but it's a corporation, so ultimately they just care about the bottom line. So they'll look for any excuse. So it's not like he's saying it based on principle. He might, but ultimately he's saying it because he's looking for a justification for his company to chart a course that makes them even more money. And at the moment is siding with Rogan. But I'm trying to make it based on principle. So it's like slightly different. But going back to your comment about this action by Neil Young coming from an individual, I see that even as more problematic, because the reason is I've thought this through. The reason why that's more problematic is because it tells you the state of the country, that people are so divided and propagandized in a way to believe that it's their duty to try to speak out against someone that is just sharing his opinion on a matter. That's just the reality of the heightened sensitivity around these
The
conversations that we
woke
have.
police.
And who creates that echo chamber? Who creates that messaging? Well, it's the mainstream media. It's directives that are coming from entrenched systems, maybe even the pharmaceutical companies. I'm intentionally not giving my opinion on whether or not I think Joe Rogan is right in his opinion. That doesn't matter. What matters is that it's just his opinion. He wasn't intentionally trying to deceive people based on, like, one thing is if he read some studies and he saw the data and he's like, I don't like that data. I'm just going to go out and outright lie to people because I'm Joe Rogan and I can do whatever I want. No, he's read some data, he's talked to some people, and he arrived at an informed conclusion, and he just shared that with other people, and that gets labeled misinformation. And I think that's really problematic, especially because, again, now it's people trying to censor each other. I mean, don't you? This isn't hyperbole. This is, at least I don't think it is. This,
Well, are
yeah.
we still thinking about Joe Rogan, or are we talking about the 45th president of the United States,
What are you talking about?
the former president of the United States?
With regards
I
to,
I think the principle, I think a lot of what you're saying is correct, but I think it's that same type of mentality and sort of line of thinking that is dividing the country, right? And you're absolutely right. I think there's certainly information that's being a narrative that is being many narratives, right? that are being thrown at us, and depending on the narrative that you happen to agree with or that you were exposed to more, you tend to agree with that. But I feel that that type of narrative, that type of logic that is pretty accurate is also being used to manipulate people and to lie about the elections of results, the result elections, to say that, oh, that the media is the enemy, and in essence create misinformation that then leads to the type of problems, to the type of division that we're feeling. And I think historically, any the American the United States of America and people from and other parts of the country and parts of the world rather have always been divided, right? Mostly along ideological lines, religious lines. But I feel that misinformation and also be in mind, yes, it's just an individual's opinion, but an individual's opinions that could lead to real life consequences. And that's what he may have his right to his opinion, but then he also had to be mindful that some people may take that as opinion as a creed, as evangelio,
But okay, so by
as the
that,
gospel. I was
by
trying to look for the word in English.
so by
As the
that
gospel.
by that logic, all of those whose opinions were that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and we invaded Iraq had tremendous consequences. Like
Yes.
hundreds of thousands of people died. By that logic, these people should be in jail,
Yes, and the media went with it.
right? But we don't apply those standards to that. So why are we select?
Because it's a large scale, right? Like how are you gonna
I mean, we
jail?
have them on video. Colin Powell holding up that vial. I mean, there's people on video that we have that were pushing for this. The New York Times, pushed for the war. And how did they get out of that? They say, well, that was just our opinion at the
It
time.
was misinformation, Herreo. It was misinformation that they got from somewhere else.
Well, I guess it's a higher principle here
For
that
sure.
that we're trying to ourselves trying to take away from us, just because we don't like that Joe Rogan has millions of listeners and we think that he could be causing harm. That's what about when NWA was rapping in the late 80s, early 90s about F the police, because they were expressing their sentiment because of the conditions in the ghetto, and then they started selling hundreds of thousands of records. They were literally saying, fuck the police. They were spreading a dangerous message to society.
And they had to pay for it, right? They were arrested, they were
Right,
intimidated
but they
by it.
weren't
They
but they
but it was information based on factual things that were happening to them and people in their community.
but Joe Rogan can say the same thing. This is a fact. This is information that I arrived at this conclusion based on an honest research of the data. And if you remember, there was a group of conservatives that were trying to censor NWA at the time. Now, fortunately, freedom of speech won out in that case, and they were able to continue putting out their message. But the situation has changed a lot more. It seems like people are a lot more sensitive and more quick to try to censor without realizing the negative long-term consequences that can have.
Yeah, I mean, and you make a good point, and I think that obviously technology has also advanced a lot since WA, and the fact that now one of the members or a couple of the members of NWA, Ice Cube, and more importantly, Dr. Dre, are now mainstream figures, performing at the Super Bowl and all that stuff, just shows the power of what they had to say creatively, right? So I think that you make a good point in that respect.
And it's true. And it's actually interesting that you don't hear society has come to terms accepting them. They're mainstream. And you don't really hear a chorus of people saying, let's revisit some of these albums from the late 80s or early 90s. Look at this hate speech. Look at what they were saying. We should cancel them. That's
That's
interesting.
true. That's true. But I think that, who knows? Maybe there's somebody out there putting together
Yeah,
the best NW hits.
maybe that's yet to come. Maybe it's just a matter of them getting into some controversy, and then we'll start seeing these videos. uh,
Yeah. No, but I also think that it's important to, as hateful as the things are that, or going back to your point about the opinion, right? It's oftentimes when you think about a person or a group of people who have a big following, and oftentimes you think that that opinion has a lot of weight, but oftentimes is the fact that maybe they're expressing a viewpoint at that particular moment in time, but they do. I think we as human beings do have the ability to change and hopefully grow from those mistakes. So I think that is important to, as hurtful or as disagreeable as some of the things that other people say, remembering that it's the behavior, right? Is what people are expressing. And you made this point earlier in the conversation that maybe he grew up in the type of family or surrounding that was what he learned. So now he has a lot of stuff that he needs to unlearn, as so many of us do.
yeah, and as you were saying earlier, it's really about intent, and it boils down to, does he have the intent to go out there and there's malice in what he's doing, in what he's trying to achieve, that he wants to purposely put out this information, or again, it's just his viewpoint, his opinion based on what he knows. And so if you come at it from, depending on what point, from what point of view you come at it, you may think this guy is a, POS, or you take a more nuanced, a more nuanced approach to what's going on. So yeah, it boils down to that. I think we can wrap it up at this. Definitely, this is an ongoing topic. It's going to, I'm sure, it's going to flare up again. We'll see what happens. We'll see if Spotify keeps censoring his episodes. We'll see if there's another splice video put together, and we'll definitely come back and comment more on this.
Sounds good.
All right. For those of you out there, if you enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Estamos on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Nos vemos.
Ciao.